The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman and Tony Kurre.
Welcome to the 420 of shows here. This is April 20th, the Monday edition of Mission Minded. Keep your mind and your mission, your mind right here on 101.1. The Truth. I am Tony Kurre, along with my wonderful partner, Michael Coleman. As we do, before we get into our topic, let's break it into prayer. Michael, would you please do the honor?
I will. Father, we are here with another day, another time of great thankfulness and appreciation that we want to express to you. Father, you are good beyond our wildest imagination. You love, you forgive, you continue to show grace and mercy. But Father, through us, you are asking that we can be your hands and feet in many ways and try to cast your light into the darkest places in this world. And so we do that by loving when it's not deserved, by forgiving when it's not necessarily asked for. Father, just being different than everybody in the world. And it's such a struggle for us, Father, because we always have this tension within us. So we pray for your strength that only can come from you to be able to win those battles and bring you glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. That was beautiful. I love sharing our story here. You and I have been doing it together for 3 or 4 years on Tony Kurre Radio through our Mission Minded platform, and now, of course, we're doing it through the lens of Jesus Christ. And I've told 1 million people that we're doing the show, and there's so many of my friends are like, "Can I come on?" I'm like, yeah. And normally, no one will want to come on any radio show I've ever done because they just don't feel comfortable coming on a radio show. But everyone wants to share their testimony now, and I love that. I'm like, sure, come on. I mean, you're welcome. So we're going to have some guests on. Deacon Dan Whitaker is going to join me from my home base, Our Lady of the Valley. He's going to join us tomorrow to talk about the 7 sacraments. That's going to be a wonderful talk. And, of course, again, this is non-denominational. We talk about everything, so feel free. Atheist, Judy, I don't care. Whoever you are, if you want to have a relationship with your Lord and Jesus Christ, you're welcome to call the show. And if you don't, you're welcome to call the show, 941-1011. I want to make this as open as possible to anyone who wants to listen, and anyone who wants to shout in, and anyone who has any ideas. We'd love to talk to you about it. And then Dallas Teague is going to join me. This woman is just absolutely remarkable. She lives here in the Birmingham area. She's a minister. She does all kinds of things online on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but she also has all these wonderful platforms about business etiquette and everything else. She's going to be just an amazing interview coming up 5 to 6 o'clock on Wednesday night right here on 101.1 The Truth. You brought something up really interesting. I'm glad you did, because there are several different types of generations that we like to associate ourselves with. We know the baby boomer generation, which is 46 to 64, the Gen X, which is 65 to 80, then the millennials, the 81 through 96 is the Gen Zs, the 97s through the 2012s, and then the Gen Alphas, which are the 2013s to the curious time. But you brought up something, and I want to know why, first of all. But you wanted to compare a couple of these generations, and I think it's a perfect time to do that, particularly since you and I we've been talking about kids. We've hit a nerve, by the way. We've been talking a lot about the kids getting out of college, maybe seniors out of high school, getting ready to go into college, graduates and everything else, because graduation time is over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I think Alabama lets out next Friday. I think Auburn lets out on May 1st, something like that. But talk about that a little bit and why you wanted to dive into this topic, because I think it's perfect for tonight.
Yeah, was listening. I read a lot online and watch a lot of news and stuff, and so sometimes I can't always remember exactly where I came across it. But the one of the issues this year, of course, it's always in election years, the underlying issues are always related to the economy. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came up was about how Gen Z and affordability. You hear about this word all the time. They started back in the fall talking about it, affordability. And really, it's just about being able to make all your basic payments. And so somebody went back and did a chart that said, okay, now you have to put it today's dollars back into 1960 when the baby boomers were the same age as the Gen Zers. So you're talking, basically back in the 60s, maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after, but basically, that decade, and talk about who actually had it harder and why. Because when you talk about affordability, you have to look at everything from the price of a home to access to capital to interest rates, and it goes on and on and on and on about all these factors. And it was a little bit of a mix. And then I had some flashbacks to being a kid, listening to my dad really complain and fuss about things that I really didn't understand how it all fit together then, but I have a much better perspective now. The reality is, back in the 70s, let's say, baby boomers, about 45 to 50% owned homes. And then Gen Z today is tracking closer to 25 to 30%. So you're talking about basically 20% less Gen Zers own homes. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at that, you go, well, that's a real gap compared to how the baby boomers had, and it begins to be widening. And again, it's the Gen Zers and the millennials primarily that are talking about, affordability, and then I think it's the Gen Alphas come after the Gen Zs. I don't know who selects this.
Yeah,
I have
Gen
no
Alphas.
idea how they get. Yeah,
and listen, it's gotten so bad now that I actually heard a discussion yesterday about why it's better to rent than it is to own, and I haven't heard that argument in 35 years because it was always better because you could write the interest off. The thing that's screwy about it, Michael, is first of all, the baby boomers actually had an opportunity. I can remember my dad burning up the mortgage, right? The last mortgage payment he made. He bought the house in 1955. They paid $25,000 for it. I can remember he made his last point payment for it, and it was paid for. Now it's almost impossible to ever even think about paying off a mortgage. First of all, people don't stay in the same home like they used to. We used to stay in homes until you paid it off for 25, 30 years. It was a 30-year mortgage. Now people move around 8 or 9 times, it seems like, in a year. So they're never in a house long enough to pay it off. But you're also talking about $400,000 home in 2025 used to cost about $230,000 back in 1976. But the fact that rent is more expensive than a house payment is the part that is making people like myself kind of shake our heads, because the reason you always want to rent was because it was a lot cheaper than it was to actually buy a home. And now I'm finding myself, it cost me $1,200 for a mortgage payment. Now I'm paying $2,100 to throw it away every month in rent. So that's something else that the Gen Z people have to worry about. Yeah,
it's really interesting when you look at, and I'm on my computer, I'm looking at specific statistics. Back in the 70s, a median home price was between $30,000 and $80,000, but the median income was between $10,000 and $25,000. So the price to income ratio was 3 to 4 times. Well, now the median home price is $400,000, and of course that's not in Alabama. When they go across the whole generation, they're taking the San Franciscos that you get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that would be less than $300,000 in Alabama. You put it there in certain places, and it's well over $1 million in California. So it's a little bit of got to keep all that in mind. But the bottom line is, it costs about double. Homes do double relative to the income today than it did back then. But that's not the only factor, because some of the things you have to keep in mind, just to put some context in it, mortgage rates back in those times were between 10 and 18%.
Yeah, they were.
It peaked at 18%. Can you imagine paying interest on a home at 18%? That's when my dad, I remember back during the Carter administration, so between 76 and 80, he was, fuel got up because OPEC had all the, there were people a mile down the road waiting to get a can of gas. But I remember that it got as high as 18%. Now, you could get savings accounts that, had a good return as well, or where you could just keep your money in cash. And that's when there wasn't as much money invested in the stock market. But interest rates today, we bellyache about it being 6 or 7%, because for so long it was 2.5% and 3%. Basically when the Feds went down to zero, it didn't cost anything virtually to borrow money. And so to give you a little bit of context, it still artificially jacked up the price of houses back then. But that was offset by lower home prices. But then you start looking at affordability. Okay, so one point that the person made that I thought was really interesting, he said, the whole country's gotten wealthier. Now, it doesn't feel that way to a Gen Zer today who says, I can't afford a house. He said, but the difference was, back in the day, if you could afford a middle-class home, you might pay, $80,000 for it. Mm-hmm. And if you couldn't afford it, though, you had a very small apartment, kids stacked in the bedrooms and all that kind of stuff. He said today a lot of people can't afford a home because they can't afford to get it financed. And a lot of that has to be, with the down payment because the rules are different. Yeah. I know, for instance, one of the advantages of being in the military is you get a VA loan and you don't have to put anything down. Mm-hmm. And so I'll be the first to say that's helped me on numerous times not have to come to the table with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 down.
Well, for a while they were paying you to get a mortgage. I mean, for a while there it was zero.
Oh yeah. But when you talk about, so if you step outside of housing and just talk about affordability, I was like, okay, we all know healthcare's gone through the roof. We know that's crazy. But the other major driver of affordability is education. Mm-hmm. And here's what's so frustrating about it. College tuition, you could pay for a college tuition back in the day with just part-time work. I mean, you could pay it off. Yeah. And there was minimal student debt. Gen Z, if tuition is up 3 to 5 times if you look at the inflation adjusted, and the average student loan debt is $30,000 plus. And we know several people who go and, they're like, well, I'm not going to work part-time. I'm just going to go to school. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to enjoy myself. So they max out and then they end up getting a degree in political science and they stop there and they've got $120,000 in debt. And then, we've talked about this, that you kind of have to start off at the bottom somewhere. Yep. And so you're so crunched, you can barely keep yourself in a 1-bedroom apartment.
And you know that going in, and that's one of the things that was it's remarkable you brought that up because we mentioned housing cost, public tuition. I guess the third thing would be that we're holding on to a lot more debt than people did. I remember back in the 70s when my dad was alive, man, they paid off their credit cards every month. I mean, yep. That's what you did. It wasn't American Express either. That was if you had a debit card or whatever, or a MasterCard or. My dad would pay off his, and I don't know anyone that pays off their card every single month now, unless, of course, they're buying their groceries and they're getting money back from a situation like that. But,
yeah.
That's another thing, too, where I don't know where Alabama lies in this, but my brother lives in Indiana, and I know that Mississippi's got some things that are tied to lotteries. I'm not saying I'm pro or against the lottery. I think it's amazing that Alabama still doesn't have something where we can generate the millions of dollars. But I know in Indiana, if you get a certain GPA, you can go to a state college for free. And so there's got to be a different way for us to be able to generate the money or the funds to allow our kids, if they want to go to college, the opportunity to go so they can.
Well, we're not. We've been talking about whether college versus trade schools or all that, what's worth it. And I'm like, okay, I want to know why college has raised far greater than the rate of inflation.
That's a great question.
Yeah, because I want to know why that is. Well, part of it is once they realize they've expanded federal aid and FAFSA programs, and so when the college itself knows, wait a minute, there's going to be more government money out there for people to get Pell Grants. So we'll start charging more, and then we'll get a certain percentage. Yep. And then colleges also know that students can borrow more, so they'll push them into student loans to cover those costs. But statistically, what you see is there's been a huge growth in non-teaching staff. So what you have are, think about this. You have, like, for instance, and I know that Alabama outlawed it along, but they just went through the equity, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so they built these huge diversity offices. Well, all of those staffs, if you have a diversity office of 50 people, they're not bringing in any money. Those people have to be paid. And you have compliance teams, and you have student service expansion, and that's something else that's huge. You have these amenities, and it's like an amenities arms race. Just like in football, we've seen it. Who's going to have the best facilities? Yep. Well, now you've got who's going to have the most luxury dorms and the fitness centers and the dining upgrades and the camping experience, just on and on and on. So it's kind of shifted just from a place of learning to a whole lifestyle product. And yet what you see is, to pay for all these additional things that are not classroom, you're not producing a better student. You're not producing a more advanced student. Lots of times you'll produce somebody that's, because you stop talking about real history and you start putting things in there like a gender studies or a focus on something that may be of great interest to you, may be very important to you, but ultimately is not going to produce a job that you can, buy a house. And so you're going to wrestle with affordability crisis.
Yeah, and this is, the more you talk, the more this makes me kind of realize that we can put ourselves in a couple of exits. By the way, 941-1011, 941-1011, 941-1011. You can also go to, of course, missionmindedradio@gmail.com, missionmindedradio@gmail.com, or info@tonykurreradio.com if you got any questions. Again, the phone number 941-1011. You can also text that number as well. Much like the cultures that we lived in, the baby boomer culture as opposed to the Gen Z culture. And I mentioned this earlier. We used to live in neighborhoods, man, and we knew our neighbors. You knew everyone 2 or 3 houses on either side of you. You knew who the crazy family was on the block. You knew who the wealthy ones on the block. You knew the ones that were doing really well. You knew the cheaters. You knew everybody on the block, and we all looked after each other. We were neighbors. We looked after our neighbors. We loved our neighbors. We did. The people next to us had police over there once a month. We knew they were coming, but they were our neighbors, and they were the first ones that if they ever had an issue, we over there bringing pot pies or whatever they needed for dinner. We looked after each other, and no one moved. I had the Bealeys across the street, I had the Crosbys to the left, I had the Fies to the right. I had them there the entire time I lived there, and I had the Mulberries behind me. I mean, I had those people, and I knew they weren't going to leave. Now, people are moving left and right. And because of the cultures we live in now, we were more committed, we were more loyal, we were more into what's the word I'm looking for? We were more committed into what we were trying to build wealth-wise and legacy-wise back in that time. We looked forward to paying off our mortgage. We knew we were going to stay in the house until that mortgage was paid off. And now in this Gen Z culture, and you can go back even to the millennials and the Gen X's, It's all about what can I get now? I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. It's the Uber society. Back then, we were committed. When you made an agreement, you had a contract. It meant something. That's when we had pensions. That's when you spent your pension. Yeah. What's that? Well, you'd have to be with a company for 20 or 30 years. No one's with a company for 20, 30 years anymore.
Yeah, ever. There's so much mobility. Nobody.
Yeah, and so now it's move. You used to own back, I think in the 70s, the average human being would live in 3 homes their entire life. Now we're living in an average of 12. I'm not talking about military families. I'm talking about regular families living in 12 different homes over the course of your lifetime. Think about that. And so we used to be, we put the effort in and we'd be invested. That's the word I'm looking for. We'd be invested in what the situation was we were in, and we fought through it. And because of that, we saw the ups and the downs, and the highs and the lows weren't as high or as low as they are now. And now we want it now. We want it now. We want it now. We're moving now. My gosh. Could you imagine a time when you would move your family out of a house just because it was a good time to sell your home? That would never happen in the 70s.
Right.
Could you imagine your dad saying, well, the market's up, honey. It looks like we can make an extra $30,000. We're going to move the entire family across town. Are you kidding me? No, you wouldn't do that. It wasn't about grabbing the easy dollar or just grabbing whatever we had to have now. And I think because of that, that's why we're seeing why things are and that's why our debt is higher. We're all about, buy it today, pay for it tomorrow.
We're not a disciplined society.
No, not at all. That's
much more. Now, we didn't have those same temptations. They didn't have automation. They didn't have Amazon. They didn't have quite the how you can target populations, kids and teenagers and all that they, all the different ways and to get in front of kids. But let me, when people again talk about affordability, one of the things when it's like, okay, what can we do? And I think, I don't want to make this political. What I hear lots of times is, well, we're not bringing in the same amount of money, so we're going to have to raise taxes, and so. Some people feel like, well, that's the way we're just going to take from those who are wealthy, because there's this view out there that, well, if some people are doing well and others aren't, well, then they're doing well because of they're taking advantage of the situation, or they're doing it on the backs of other people. And so everybody's coming up with these solutions. But one of the things I think, and I'm a big market forces guy, I think almost anything can be resolved by the idea of a supply and demand. So, and let me give you a good example of how all that's hidden in our society. And I'll take education, but I'll also take medical, because that's a big problem as well. We have somebody. I didn't come up with this on my own. That is an illustration from years ago. But they said if you went into a doctor's office and there was the old lunch menu up there and said, okay, here's all the services we have. For an exam, it's $50. Mm-hmm. For an X-ray, it's $100. For whatever it is, and then you could go, okay, this is what it costs to get an exam here. Then you go down the street to the other doc in the box, and you go in, and he's got all his costs listed out. Yeah. But they don't do that. What they do is when they give you insurance packages, and I've done this with several organizations, what they do is they come in, they go, okay, you want these things, it's going to cost you this amount per employee. But what you don't see behind that is how it's detailed out. So you don't know how much this third party is getting to get you that insurance rate. So you don't know who's making what. You just go, oh, Blue Cross Blue Shield is going to cost.
And I'm not sure they know even when they're charging you for it.
Well, and what education does is, because what they say is, oh, well, you got to take 30 hours or whatever, and then because they make the packages so complex, they'll give you several scholarships. Oh, we'll take this away, we'll do that, play it around, and then they just come up with a fee, but it's not broken down per hour. Now, you can find that information, but lots of times, with the housing cost and all the other kind of things, just so much of that is hidden, just like with the medical cost. And what I would like to see is almost a more transparent, where it says, okay, that if you go to Alabama, I'm just making this up, that it's going to be $200 for every credit hour, and then here's all your other fees or whatever. Well, and then you had another school, I'll just say Auburn, who says, okay, we're going to offer, for that same degree, we're going to charge $180 or $175 per hour, and here's our fees. And then what happens is, then they start competing, just like two clothing stores selling the same thing. They're going to compete to push down price to get an advantage on the other. That's where it drives down costs, is when you have competition.
Yeah.
But right now, everything goes to an insurance company who doesn't require that transparency. The government doesn't require that transparency. And so insurance company, and the whole game. And once you file a claim, they'll send it, and they get you. The insurance company sends them a predetermined amount of money for that procedure that they've already agreed upon.
Yeah, and more so in the state of Alabama than any other state I've ever been in part of, just because of the Blue Cross Blue Shield. And there's not a doctor. If you were a doctor back in the mid to late 90s, when the Blue Cross Blue Shield, the BSBC stuff started coming through, and you were a doc, and you were a doc, and you were your neighborhood doc. I remember we had a guy named Dr. Namath. He was the only doctor in Westchester County. He was where everybody went. He had a nice little business, wasn't driving a nice car or anything, but he was a great doc. Everybody knew Dr. Namath. And now you don't have those guys anymore. They got gobbled up because they could not take any other insurance outside Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm not hammering on Blue Cross Blue Shield. They always say their own thing going on there, but no, that's we could do a whole show on health.
Well, you can't. Well, one of the things is like you have limited competition in states, and that's government regulatory. If you would say, okay, we're going to make insurance as competitive as possible. So you might have Blue Cross Blue Shield in every single state, but if you let other insurance companies' health costs be able to sell insurance in Alabama, you've got Viva, which is coming out of UAB. You have some United Health, but basically everybody else is walled off from coming in and selling true hospital insurance and being competitive.
Yeah.
And all that does is you're taking away. And that's why you saw things, it's not the only factor, but you saw things like Obamacare, which a lot of people fell in love with the idea, said, well, everybody should have health care. So Obamacare came in, but right from the very beginning, they knew it was going to blow up in cost for some of those very reasons, because the way it's designed for insurance companies to come in, they started out low, but they knew they were going to recoup their money later on down the line, and because there's absolutely zero competition. And when you remove market forces, the only other way to control spending is when you try to do price controls, which is very, it's never shown historically where price controls are effective long term.
Yeah. 941-1011, 941-1011. Love to get your thoughts on what we're talking about tonight. Anything else that's on your brain? This is a wonderful show called Mission Minded. We've only been on for about a month. Michael and I have known each other for years, and we're just two guys that love talking about Jesus Christ, love talking about business, and hopefully we can tie those two things together. We do a little prayer at the top of the show. And we have a special guest, Deacon Dan Whitaker is going to join us tomorrow night from OLV, and also Dallas Teague, an amazing young lady, is going to join us coming up on Wednesday from 5 until 6. We're on Monday through Friday, 5 to 6 o'clock, 941-1011. So give us a call. The one thing that I will say this, and we haven't mentioned this, we have this is one of my get off my lawn moments. I actually thought at one point I almost texted you. I think I did text you, and then I pulled my text back. So what would you think about doing a show just about men getting older, so we could just sit here and complain about everything that's going on in our lives because we're so knowledgeable and we're so we got the world figured out, my friend. We're getting better looking and more distinguished every day of our lives. But the one thing that is amazing, and I brought this up the other day, and dude was still sitting by the utility pole this morning when I went to a meeting this morning at 8:00. The same guy's been sitting there. Anything helps with the anything helps sign, and he's sitting there looking at his cell phone, and I just think it's so hilarious to see a dude. I realize how important cell phones are. You almost have to have one, but then part of me says no, you don't. My phone, by the way, has been on Do Not Disturb since this morning at 7:30, and I totally forgot that it was on Do Not Disturb. I haven't missed anything. I've got like 20 phone calls I got to make when I get done with the show, but it's not stuff that has to be done immediately. It's not stuff I didn't miss anything. School didn't call. No big deal. I'm okay. I could have left my phone at home. So I see this bum, asking for money, and he's sitting there in a hot sweltering sun today. Yet he's sitting there looking at his Instagram post, and I'm thinking to myself, this is so messed up. The one thing that has come down quite a bit, which is amazing to me in the grand scheme of things, is technology.
You are 100% correct.
You and I, so you and I growing up, the biggest thing you could buy TV-wise was a 27-inch tube, okay? It was 27 inches. It was the biggest thing you could buy. The last one I bought was $899. And this was 1985, 86, 87. It was really heavy. Probably took me two people. Then we got into projection TVs, where the big screens, but the screens were real fuzzy. But man, if you had a big screen TV, man, you were the man. And the darker the room, the better the TV was. Now you can go get a 75-inch. I saw a 75-inch TV at Best Buy the other night for $289, and I was thinking to myself, 75-inch TV. I mean, everything that they growing up to me, Michael, and I think you're the same way. Everything was based off the size of your woofers and the size of your TV. When you walked in a dude's apartment, if he had speakers lined up on each side of the room, man, he was the man. And if he had a big screen TV, he was the man. You knew he had something special. Now
and a big stereo stack too.
And a big stereo stack, a Kenwood stereo stack that had was one thing on top of the other. And if you had the bigger the stereo, man, the bigger the man. Period. It wasn't the size of your tweets; it was the size of your tweeters. If you had those things going on, now it's like it's amazing to me in this time where I'm paying $7 for a gallon of milk. The other day I went into the store. Brawny has got this brand new 3-ply paper towel, right? I don't need 3 plies, but I figured I'd take this one sheet and I cut it into 3 pieces, and then I get to pick a size. Maybe I can get like 17 rolls of paper out of one roll. It was $21 for 6 rolls of paper towels, and it was buy one, get one free. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I'm getting a $21 thing for free. Of course, I bought it and didn't realize that I'm paying $21 for 12 rolls of paper towels. Yet I can go buy a television, a 75-inch television, the biggest thing on the earth, which has got everything for $289 from a technology standpoint. I wanted you to get into that. That was something I had circled here. I wanted you to talk about why in the world are the prices of everything that we need going up all day long, yet a bum, a guy who will work for anything. Of course, if I gave him a meal, he'd probably throw it down. He wants his money for his liquor. He's been sitting at that same sign for 3 days now. He can have a cell phone and a 75-inch TV, but yet he can't afford to go buy some paper towels. Answer me that, please.
All right, so I got to tell you what I think is a humorous story about, I'll just say street people. There was a guy. When I was in Augusta, Georgia, I was stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia, quite a bit because I was in the Signal Corps, and that was the home of the Signal Corps. And I used to see this guy walking all the time. He had brown leather skin, a white guy, but brown leather skin, just because he walked around just in shorts and a sleeveless T-shirt, sometimes no T-shirt. And he always had a huge a huge bag where he's walking around picking up soda cans, beer cans, whatever, aluminum cans.
Yeah.
and his name was Ernie, and everybody called him the Can Man. And so one day, and he did it 7 days a week. And one day, came home from church, and we got out, my kids, and Ernie's sitting right on my stoop. We were living in an apartment at the time, and Ernie was sitting on the stoop, and so my wife and daughter two daughters walked by and go in the house, and I said, Ernie, how you doing? And he said, I'm doing all right. I mean, just walks up and down in this heat all day long.
Yeah.
I said, Ernie, that's a hard way to make money, is walking around picking up cans, especially in Augusta, Georgia, in the summertime. He said, yeah. I said, so on a good day, let's say your bag's slam full, how much money can you make? He goes, I could make between $11 and $12. Ugh. And I said, you walk around for hours carrying this bag for 11, 12 hours. I said, as soon as you walk out of these apartments right there, there's a McDonald's, and they have a help wanted sign. He goes, I can't work at McDonald's. I said, why not? He said, the taxes have eaten me alive. I said, well, that's a good point. I said, I got to be honest with you. I didn't think about that, Ernie.
That's funny.
But I will tell you where technology's come from, and especially since we've gone to LEDs, and LED technology, resistors, just all the way through the system, they found cheaper way to make products, build them faster. My dad, he was a State Farm agent, and he was just starting out in the late, I think it was 69 he started, early 70s. And he was one of the first ones in the Greenville area, first business people, to buy a calculator. And I asked him, it was a big deal because you had to figure up insurance rates and all that, so there was a real need for it. He said the first calculator he bought cost him $200. Well, if you did that in today's dollars, I mean, that's 3-4 times that. Yeah, maybe $1,000 now. And, calculators are on our phones. I mean, they're so ubiquitous. If you had to buy one separately, just wanted to do simple math, I mean, get them for $5. But that just lets you, as a great example. And then, depending on how old our audience is of who's listening, you get in the late 70s, you had the beta machines, and then the VCRs came out. Well, I went to Germany in 1985. It was my first duty assignment in right outside of Munich, and went to the PX, and I said, I've got to have a VCR. I've got to be able to watch movies. Stores like video stores were just coming out and being super popular, and I paid $400 for an Hitachi VCR. And it was a steal back in the day. I didn't have to pay any tax over the BX because it had a little remote, like the remote actually fit into the machine, so you could do it from the machine. You could push the buttons, or you could pull it off and take it with me. And I mean, I was the man that I had $400 for a VCR, and then when they stopped making them, I mean, you could get them for less than $25.
Yeah.
It was just crazy, the level of like you said, like technology becomes easier and easier and easier. I mean, less and less expensive as it gets greater. Now, part of the problem now is they give you so many options, and you feel like you have to be plugged into every, like Hulu, Netflix. Mm-hmm. You got to pay for this streaming service. You got to have this device. You got to have.
You know what it is? It reminds me a lot of the printer. You can go to Best Buy, and I saw a printer the other day. It was $19 for an HP printer, but they charge you $65 for the ink. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is a nice printer. I'm sitting here looking at it right now because my printer went belly up. You don't fix printers. You just throw them away and you buy them. That's what you do with your TVs now. You don't get them fixed anymore. You just throw them away because you go buy another one. But and then I went and bought ink, and it was $65, and that'll last me about a month. So they're going to get you, one way or another.
Oh yeah, well, there was a genius who actually came up with that and said, we'll make, the money is in the ink, Because once they own the machine, then you've got them right where you want them, because they have to buy the ink. So make it easy to get the printer and then get used to the printer. And when you buy a new one, they give you just enough ink to last about a week. And then you have to go and buy the regular items. And you're right, it's a punch in the gut.
It really is. So let me ask you this, and I love your opinion, and I've talked to you for a long time, and usually whenever I have a question about something that's bigger than myself, I always go to Michael Coleman because he's always got the answers. So okay,
I wish that were true.
Well, I believe in you, and that's enough for today. Baby boomers, Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Zs, and Generation Alphas. I don't know what's going to come next. But if we're looking at the price where you just talked about a house in 1970 is running you 45 or 50 grand, and now it's $400,000 for the same house in 2025. Obviously, the housing we're in a heap of trouble here in this country because we're like I don't know, like 300,000 homes under, and you would think that building homes would be a good moneymaker, and there's just no money to be made in building homes, particularly since when we went through COVID, man. I mean, I remember you could buy a 2x4 for $3, and now they're $13 a piece. I mean, the price of wood has gone through the roof. The price of when I have to spend more on rent than I do on buying a house. And people go, well, go buy a house then. Well, I can't afford a $400,000. And for a while in my neighborhood here, I mean, a house wouldn't get on the market for an hour, and it was gone. It was crazy, and now at least they're on the market for a couple of weeks, and I guess a lot of people like it'll eventually clean itself up. I know 2008 had a lot to do with that in the housing market because you had all these different countries buying all these different mortgages, these Fannie Mae's and all this stuff in bulk, and then of course they all fell apart. I had to do some homework, and I didn't understand that until just several weeks ago, and how that whole thing came down. But what do you see? Is it still the American dream to own a home? I mean, I'm okay with renting, and I listen. I loved writing off that $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 in interest every year. That was wonderful. But there is something to be said. I've been renting the same place now for 3.5 years, and it is nice to know that if anything goes wrong with the place, I don't have to worry about anything. Now I've been very blessed that nothing's fallen apart here, but I'm almost hoping it does because I know I don't have to pay for it. But where do you think we are in say 5 years with the housing market in this country right now?
Well, it's not, when you look at places like California and stuff like that, it's just simply not sustainable. But for the average person, I mean, there's sometimes things balloon up and it comes back down again. The market corrects itself. And like you said, 2008 saw a lot of people. Half the market was underwater and, just got crunched through all that stuff. But I think when you look, and I'm certainly no housing expert, but I have tried to teach myself a little bit just to have some very, very basic understanding of and really kind of what made me looking at it was, when you take a place like New York City. Now, I've never lived in a city as large as New York, and a lot of the housing issues were a little bit complex. It's not something I was new, so I had to do background research to understand what it was all about. And there's a lot of factors in that. One of the things I will tell you, though, is if you look at now millions of people who have been taken out of the country, who were illegal, the 4 years under President Biden, where it's estimated to be between 12 and 20 million people came in. Well, lots of times those migrants on their own could not have even afforded an apartment or whatever, but a lot of, especially in blue states, they got a lot of housing vouchers and stuff. And so go back to the supply and demand. The supply wasn't there. And so what happens is, let's say I'm a landlord and I've got 10 houses. I'll use an example. I used to know a guy. He bought a bunch of homes that were middle-class homes back in the 50s and 60s. This was actually in Columbus, Georgia, when I was stationed at Fort Benning. But just over time, they had kind of just gone down, and they were considered primarily lower class, but maybe middle lower class. And so all he would do is, a tenant move out, he cleaned it up, slapped some paint on it, just kept the water flowing, all that, just kind of basic stuff. And but he would have some houses sometimes that were tougher to rent. It may be the neighborhood, it may be something specific with the house. So he would have to lower it, or give somebody like first month's rent free, something like that. But if he had all 50 of his houses that were booked up, and then he had a waiting list, that demand, then he could actually jack the rent up, because people would pay it. And that's the supply and demand. And people go, well, under that scenario, that's really not fair. But when you're supplying, there's more demand than there is supply, prices are going to go up, and vice versa. So now, if you remove, and I don't know what the latest total is, 1.5 million migrants out of the country, that starts to free up some homes. Yeah. Now, again, typically on the lower end of the scale, but there's also cities have regulations. I mean, you would not believe the number of houses that are apartments that are sitting empty in New York City because they are not allowed due to different restrictions and different rules, and with rent-controlled apartments. I wanted to say 2,000 apartments that are sitting empty that could be rented, but due to regulation can't be.
What's this regulation you're talking about?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not an expert on. I think part of it is they came in and said, okay, now imagine if you had an apartment that if it was just free market, you could probably get $3,000 a month, okay? Mm-hmm. But they came in and said, nope, this is a rent-controlled apartment, and you can't charge, I'm just going to make this up, but half of that, so $1,500 a month. Well, then what they did was they came in and said, okay, every apartment, so what began to happen was landlords stopped putting money because there was no extra money to put into repairs and upkeep. Mm-hmm. So those apartments that were forced to be rented at $1,500, they just start going down. Plumbing needs replaced, floors need replaced, whatever. There's no money to do it because you're not able to charge what the market price is. But then New York City came in and said, no, every apartment you rent has to be a certain standard. Well, now imagine you're the landlord and you're like, okay, I am losing in essence $1,500 a month on this apartment for what I could. And then they come along and go, hey, you've got to spend $40,000 to get this up to code. And you're like, no, I just won't rent it.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you're not allowing me to make money on it to pour back into it. You're forcing me to take a loss, and I can't keep it up. There's not money. I'm not making any money to be able to keep the apartment up to the standard. And now you're saying I can't rent it, so I just won't rent it. I'll hold on to it, but I won't rent it. And there's thousands of apartments in Manhattan, and the 2,000 is just in the Manhattan area. We're not talking about Queens and the Bronx and all the other places. So lots of times you can have a government like Mondami, who's a socialist, who's a communist. I mean, he said all those things. I'm not calling him names.
Yeah.
But he says, I'm for the renter, and I go, okay, that's great, but so he's like, I'm going to force you to rent certain things, but what people like that, he's never managed anything, he's never run anything, he has no concept of what it is to have an asset, use that asset to create a profit, so that people like that just think, well, you just sit around with the profit and you just smoke cigars and drink fancy liquor and sit on your butt all day. No, you've got to have capital being poured back into your investments to continue to keep it up. When you rob them of that, you have what you have. So my point is, a housing shortage is not always that there's just not enough houses available. There's several other factors that go into that that can affect what's available out there.
Gotcha. I wanted to share a story with you real quick because we have about 10 minutes here left on the show, and I like to talk about. I don't love getting older. I love getting wiser. I love when my brain says one thing, but my body says something else. You feel me here? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So my son and I went to the Alabama State Fair this past Saturday night. My daughter, who just turned 14, said she had a quote unquote date, and I was like, okay, well, this is certainly going to need a chaperone here. And she went with a friend of hers, and these two boys are fine. They were nice. They actually, the one kid brought my daughter some flowers, which I was like, wow. At the age of 14, I don't think I'd ever been doing flowers, so he certainly made some points with me. Anyway, so anyone knows me knows I got this special needs boy, and I will do anything for my son to experience life. He's legally blind, epileptic. He's on the autism spectrum, but he's going to graduate from high school this year. He's going to go to Montevallo. He's got this Falcon Flight program. He's going to get in, and he's just amazing. I don't know what my life would be without him. He's just an amazing kid. So whenever he wants to do something, I'll do it with him. And so, but he's never really been into rides. He doesn't like rides because he can't see things real well. And so when things are flying by his face, and you feel like something's going to hit you in the face, it's not a good thing. So for some reason, he decided he wanted to ride rides of all places at the state fair. And I'm thinking to myself, I said, really? And so we got on this thing called the Scrambler. Which is this thing that you sit side by side and you scramble on it. So we got on that. So I was good with that, and I'm feeling pretty good. I got off. I was a little woozy. I'll be honest with you. I was a little woozy. I used to work at amusement parks. I set a record for riding the most roller coasters in a 60-minute period at Six Flags. I think it's a record that still stands. So I was all about, riding roller coasters. There's nothing I wouldn't do. I'd do it all.
Yeah.
And so he's looking at like the drop zone. That's the thing that goes up like 100-something feet, and they just drop you. And I was like, that ain't happening. There was another thing that went upside down. I was like, honey, I know it's safe, but that ain't happening. So we get on a Ferris wheel. So I'm thinking, I go on a Ferris wheel is nice, and I'm not real crazy about heights, but I made a conscious effort to point out, oh, there's our house, and there's Highway 31, and there's Michael Coleman lives over there, and decided, and so he thought that was kind of cool. And so then he steps it up a bit, and he wants to go on the fun house. The fun house, and the fun house is like, fun house. I mean, it's the mirrors and the floor shakes a little bit, and I was like, okay. Well, I get on the fun house, and this should have told me something. The last thing in the fun house to actually exit the ride is this barrel that is rolling. And you have to walk across this barrel and walk a little to your left because it's rolling to the right. So you can walk through it and go out. And I thought this would be kind of funny if I lay down in this thing and let it roll me a couple of times, to have fun. So I did that. Well, it rolls me up, and I hit my head on the side of it. It's just a big, metal drum. And I can hear the Mexican guy running the ride. He's like, you want me to turn it off? And I was like, no. I said, I'm good. And he's like, you sure? And I said, yeah, I'm good. And so finally I called Uncle, and I put my hand up. I said, yeah, turn it off. And so here's this 60-year-old man who needed them to turn off the Funhouse ride so I could get off the flipping thing. And so I get off the ride. And so I'm kind of, eating my crow, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and there were some people laughing, and I was like, that's okay, no big deal. So then my son wants to get on this ride called Oxygen, which is a ride that it was like a giant basket. It could get like 8 or 9 people in the basket. There was no seat belts, and you put your back up against it, and it spun you around. The centrifugal force that would keep you up against the side of the basket, and there were 2 of them, and it spun around. And so I get off that ride, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is, you know, and of course, my mind's thinking, you know, I'm with my 19-year-old son. I want him to have a great time. I am going to ride everything he wants to ride, and I'm not going to let him down. But my 60-year-old body started telling me, okay, you don't have too many of these rides left in you. The last thing we get on is this thing called the alien abduction, and it was a spaceship, and it just went. It didn't tilt or anything. It just went around and around really, really fast. It was encapsulated, so you'd walk in. There was a ceiling on. There's bright lights inside, and it would spin, and the floor dropped. And I've been in these rides a million times. I thought, you know, I can do this. Michael, I got off. I barely made it before I threw my guts up. I mean,
oh wow!
I was trying to think. I think the last time I threw up was probably because I drank too much, and that was well over 10, 15 years ago. But I mean, I was just one of those situations where I wanted to share with it. It is cool to get old. It's okay. And my son looks at me and he goes, "Dad," he said, "that was the most awesome night I've ever had at a state fair." And I was like, "Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, honey." He goes, "You know why?" And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because you puked your brains out." And I come to find out that I think he was trying to get me to ride as many rides as possible so he could actually see his old man throw his guts up. And I was like,
trying to break you down.
He broke me down. And I'm sitting there looking at it, and it was just funny. I wanted to share that story because I know there's men out there that can probably appreciate that. But for a 60-year-old guy, I rode 5 or 6 rides, but I have never thrown up. And he also told me, he's like, "Dad, that's why I didn't eat, and that's why I didn't let you eat before we got on the rides." I was like, "You're either smart or smart aleck, one of the two." But anyway, 941-1011, 941-1011. Anytime you want to share a story about getting older, but that was one of the times where my body spoke louder than my brain did, and I just wanted to share that story. But boy, it was. Another one of those situations in life, man, and I'm still kind of dizzy. I must have had a concussion or something somewhere in my life because I got out and I was walking sideways, man. I couldn't walk a white line to save my life. But so
getting older, it's so funny that I think all the time in my head when something comes up and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that, and it's like. Especially with like moving stuff, I'm like, I'll grab that. And I remember my dad when he was getting in his last few years, and he died fairly young, he was 76. But I remember there were times, last couple of years, he'd be talking big. He'd say, "Hey, let's go out and work in the garden." And we'd be out there 10 or 15 minutes out in the heat, and he's like, "I got to go in." Which I was more than glad to do. I wasn't interested in being out in the garden.
That was the garden, man. That was the garden,
I know, but I find myself very often in that same thing. And I've dug up some, we've got some bushes with some deep roots. And so I'm
You just did your bathroom, didn't you? Didn't you just do a bathroom recently?
Well, I ended up having that done.
Okay, well, I know you were working on some of it.
I almost was stupid enough to try to do it myself, but I've embarrassed myself on indoor projects, outdoor projects. There's no level of humiliation that I've not subjected myself and my neighbors to. But, I'm reminded every day of exactly, I'll do something that reminds me, you could do this 20 and 30 years ago. You can no longer do it, and you just got to come to terms with it.
Yeah, I saw a guy this afternoon. I walked my dog before we did the show, and I saw some guy, and I'm not kidding you, he's got to be 80, 85 years old, and he was weed eating. And he had the mask on, the whole 9 yards. I said, "God bless you." And he had the visors on. I said, "God bless you, man." I said, that's great. And I'm thinking to myself, heck, I can't even ride the fun house, and I'm 60 years old and I'm puking my brains out. I don't know what I'm going to be doing when I'm 75. So maybe I need to slow it down a little bit. All right, my man. You got off the next couple nights. I'm going to miss you big time, but we will have some great guests. Deacon Dan Whitaker from OLV is going to join us tomorrow night, and then Dallas Teague. 941-1011. Feel free to give us a call on both those nights. We're on every Monday through Friday between 5 and 6. Love doing this show with you, my man. Have yourself a wonderful evening. God bless, okay?
Hey, I'll see you on Thursday. Have a great next couple shows.
Thank you, man.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.